Welcome to Town Hall number 9, the education crisis in Ohio. We'll be joined tonight by State School Board member John Hagan and Dr. Kelly Kohls. If you have a question this evening pertaining to education, we would encourage you to click the raise your hand button at the bottom of the screen. That will get you in line um, to ask a question live tonight. For those of you that haven't been on, we will have a panelist discussion for about 30 minutes where you can follow along on the slides, discuss some of the issues and solutions we have for education. In the last hour tonight, we turn it over to you for your questions. So don't be afraid to click the raise your hand, get in the queue, and we'll get you on tonight with our panelists. It is about 5 after, so to kick things off tonight, I'd like to welcome former Congressman Jim Renacci.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. As Tom said, this is our 9th town hall. We have had town halls regarding everything from our state spending to our state taxes to issues about gun, Second Amendment. And this one tonight is a really important one as well. It's about education. And I know a lot of people have contacted us and said, we'd really like to discuss education. And we got some great panelists tonight. For those that don't know Jim Renacci, just want to give you a little background on myself. I moved to Ohio in 1983, started my first business, went from one business to over 60 businesses over the span of 3 decades, created over 1,500 jobs, employed over 3,000 people. And during that period of time, brought a lot of people with me, traveled the state of Ohio, had businesses everywhere from Portsmouth to Waverly to Youngstown, everywhere from the Northeast corridor in Toledo to as far south as Marietta. And so I had a great opportunity for many, many years to travel the state and get involved with many, many communities. But I will also tell you that I was privileged in 2019 when I was elected to the, well, I say 2019, that's when I left Congress, 2009, but 2010 when I was elected to the US Congress. And I went to Washington for one particular reason. I had a Chevy dealership in my hometown that I had worked out a deal where I was moving the dealership out on the highway. General Motors was very happy with our dealership and our performance. And then all of a sudden, the federal government took over General Motors. And next thing you know, I was told that my business was not essential anymore. And it sounds interesting because we heard that from our governor over the past year, that government and leadership in Congress, but also in our state, can determine what business is essential and what business isn't essential. I ran for Congress because of that. I was elected to Congress in 2010. I served until 2019. And I realized that Washington is broken. But I also realized that not only is Washington broken, it's going to be very tough to fix it. So we better fix our state. And in 2017, I announced that I was going to run for governor. And I started to really learn the issues that are affecting our state. So since 2017, I've been looking at this state, wondering why we've lost so much ground. Here's a guy that's been here since 1983, lived the American dream. State of Ohio was booming 30 years ago. And then I find in the last 5 years, 10 years, that we are falling behind in so many areas, whether it's job growth, but one of them is education. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We cannot compete if we do not have educated students and educated individuals. I think one of the things, if you go to my website, jimrenacci.com, you'll see that the University of Akron did a study that shows that the best states are the ones that have the better education systems. And we need to be able to compete. We need to be able to compete with other states. So tonight's topic is a good topic. We have to be able to have a state that can compete in the education system. And that's why I said we have 2 great panelists. The first panelist I'd like to introduce you to is State School Board member John Hagan. John, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Jim, I'll make it brief. Thank you for having me. I currently serve on the State Board of Education as an elected member representing the 8th District. The 8th District goes from Stark County, where I live, over to the Pennsylvania border and south all the way to Marietta. So we've got a very large territory in the size-wise, it's about 1.5 congressional districts. So lots of travel to see people, lots of area to cover. I've been involved in elected office throughout my life, starting out as a township trustee. I've served 8 years in the Ohio legislature. Currently, I'm in my 3rd year on the board, and it is quite a place, needs a lot more business-minded people. I have a family-owned heating and plumbing business that I've run all of my life, right from the family farm where I grew up. So we're deep-rooted in our community and certainly care about the state, and education is a very, very important area and needs lots of work.
Well, thank you, John. We appreciate you being on tonight, and we're looking forward to some information that you can bring to the table. Our next panelist is Dr. Kelly Kohls. Kelly, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, as this bio says, it's a little off. I've been actually a wife of my husband for 40 years. I have 5 children who are publicly educated, but while I was in office on the school board, Springboro School Board and the Warren County Career Center School Board, I saw a lot of things that parents just don't know and just don't understand. So at the end of my term, when I rolled off the school board, I did take my children with me, and I homeschooled my last one 2 years at home. He's now a nuke in the Navy, and my kids have done academically very well. But I served on those school boards, and I learned a tremendous amount of information that parents and citizens need to know. I go all over the state, wherever 3 people gather, and I tell them about why education is failing our students. And that's a fact. Why now I call the education system the education cartel, because that's a fact. So it's been through some rough experiences that I can share and give the statistics on our failures in public education.
Well, thank you, Kelly. And again, I look forward to getting through some slides and some information, and then really opening up to many of the people that are on the town hall tonight. So let's talk about some of the issues affecting our students. I'm just going to go through them, then I'm going to ask both of our panelists their thoughts. Look, family issues, the opioid epidemic. I got to tell you, as I travel the state over the last couple of years, and by the way, we are now 50th again in opioid overdoses just in this past year. So our state, which started to creep up and at least not be in the bottom rung, is back to 50th because of much of the lockdowns and much of the problems in this past year. But that affects families, that affects students. Divorce, all have an impact on the classroom. Technology, of course, integrating technology in the classroom has been slow to catch up, largely due to financial limitations and slow adaptability among teachers. Bullying, we talk about that all the time, has been a historic problem, but now it's extending to social media and impacting the emotional health of students. Attitudes, students can be apathetic towards learning and disrespectful to teachers. I'll tell you, and think about it, talk about apathetic. When you're not in the classroom and you're working from your home, I've heard so many stories about that over the past year. I'm hoping that both of you can talk a little bit about that, where some kids just don't really want to learn sitting in front of a computer. And then testing. Teaching to the test may be a problem in allowing teacher flexibility in the classroom. Students who fail aren't given remediation. They're still passed on to the next grade. But one other thing I do want to talk about, as I traveled the state over the last 2 years, and I heard about individuals that had opioid addiction, one of the things they told me was, they said, Congressman, here's a problem. I was told that I had to have algebra and all these other classes. I didn't want them. I just wanted to be a mechanic, or I just wanted to be somebody who could do body work. And yet I was told I was a failure if I didn't go through the academic side and pass all these, tests. I'd like to hear from both of you on that. So with that, why don't I start with John, your thoughts on any of these issues, and then we'll turn it over to Kelly.
Well, first I would just say on family issues, this tends to be the largest obstacle to education in children getting an education. If they have turmoil at home, it's pretty hard for them to concentrate and do well in school. Unfortunately, I think we have moved to a nanny state type approach, which if you want something messed up, give it to government, right? So that's kind of where we're at. And the problem with the approach on trying to fix family issues from school is it's a one size fits all, and we start applying things to kids that don't need help in creating problems right along the way. Technology, yes, you know, if we had been farther forward in technology, we wouldn't have had such a tough time making a transition. You know, we have a lot of e-schools that are very successful with students, but they know how to make that connection with the kids, and of course they know how to get the kids engaged. Bullying, unfortunately, I see bullying too often used as a tool to promote a variety of unsavory things. When I say that, rather than just address the one-on-one situations that happen in schools, we tend to see people directing people to materials that children shouldn't be looking at. Student attitude is really going to come mostly from what happened at home. If the parents don't value education, it's hard to believe that a kid's going to value it. Testing, I think we test people to death. You know, all I hear in Columbus is data, 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 but we're not seeing improvements due to testing. We're just seeing kind of a status quo. And I believe that if we look at the testing, we can see that the grade levels have been slowly dumbed down. The tests that kids are taking in sixth grade sometimes look like the ones that kids were taking in third grade 20 years ago. So that is not an answer.
Kelly, you have any thoughts?
Sure. I think the attitudes of our students are reflective of the attitude towards the curriculum content. The students are being told nonstop at every class, almost every day, to disrespect their elders, disrespect or ignore their parents. They were grown up in a different age. The foundations that these children have had in the past, they no longer have because they're torn down by the curriculum. Their faith is silly and not science. Their parents don't know what's going on. You have to trust us. We know what's going on in education. These students are having their foundations torn out from under them. So that's why they don't have respect for anybody, themselves, the teachers, their parents, because the system is doing it to them. You have to understand this curriculum is nonstop tearing apart their foundations. Their history is bad. Their founding fathers are bad. The Constitution, the flag, everything that they have always had as their foundation is torn apart. They're being driven crazy. That's why their attitudes are poor. Not just that, but their family issues. Why is opioids so prevalent? Because so many people have gone on the public dole instead of having a job that they have to attend every day, that they have the time, they have the money, they have the means to go ahead and take drugs instead of living life in reality. Divorce is something that's been there forever. That's not harmed education if we have good parenting. We never will have perfect parents. I'm not, you're not, nobody is. But I believe most parents are doing a great job of raising their kids no matter what's going on in their environment. I am not going to blame the parents for what's happening in public education. I blame public education. The testing is ridiculous. We all know that the test guides everything that comes before it. The test guides the curriculum. The test guides the standards. The standards did not come first. The test came first. That's a fact. Don't try to tell me anything else. I know. So everybody had to perform to that test. The test is a liberal, left-leaning, and again, tears apart the foundations that these children have in their heads and in their homes. The best person to teach these kids and change these social issues are their parents. Their parents should be the ones teaching them about social issues, not the school district. If the school district public education would stick to math, reading, and science, we'd be so much better off than the kinds of stuff that they are teaching our kids, which really messes with their heads.
Well, thank you, Kelly. And for those that are on the town hall tonight. Make sure you can ask some questions. I'd also love to make sure you have some examples, whether it's your own children or your neighbors or whatever. So keep that in mind as we go through some of these things. Let's talk about facts and figures. Ohio today is 39th in overall educational ranking, 89% graduation rate statewide. 51% of Ohio students are deemed economically disadvantaged. 612 school districts in Ohio. By the way, we talked about this in one of our segments. One of the reasons why we spend so much in Ohio is that we still have the same amount of school districts, even though our population of 18-year-olds is declining. And for those that don't know this statistic, in 2034, we'll have the lowest amount of 18-year-olds ever in the history of the state of Ohio, which means we're not growing, we're not gaining children, we're not gaining students, yet we still have the same amount of school districts. That puts an overhead burden on our state, something we'll have to think about, not only with high schools, but colleges as well. 1.65 million students attend Ohio schools, 8 state school board members appointed by the governor, not elected by the people. I'm going to ask the panelists about this, but I'm hoping everyone learns something tonight. And this one's very important. You have a governor who appoints 8 school board members, and I think there are 10 elected, but I'm going to ask John to go into that. But think about it. A governor can actually set the standard for how a school or school systems are run by appointing 8 people who believe either in one area or another versus the different school districts having their opportunities to engage. So John, you want to talk about some of these issues, but also touch on this school board members?
Sure, Jim. First of all, I have to say that 39th in overall education should make everyone in education cry in their hands. That's a sad scenario, as is 89% graduation. And as I deal with the people in Columbus, I find that the 89% graduation rate doesn't seem to bother our ODE people. And that shakes me up. I can't believe that there isn't more concern. And when I look at some of the good people that work in some of the alternatives, such as dropout prevention and recovery and so on, and are able to take kids that just didn't make it at all in the public school system and get them graduated and get them out into the workforce, I'm impressed with that. 51% of Ohio students economically disadvantaged. Yeah, there's a real problem there. And of course, we see that economically disadvantaged is tied directly to poor performance. When I say that, every once in a while you see some bright light in the area where people come from a very poor background, but generally it's hand in hand with failure. The number of school districts, I may differ a little on this. I know that people love their local school. What I need and what I want to see people do is not just love it for the fact that it's where you went to school, etc. Love it because you care about the children and get involved. Run for school board, go to school board meetings, make sure that the things that are happening in your school are what the community believes in. The 165 million students attending, or 1.65 million attending, it's a big job. There's no question about that. On the school board members, I'll just point out one thing here real quickly that kind of makes this stand out to me. There are 11 elected members. There are 8 appointed members. Okay, for the elected members, of which I am one, we represent about 1 million people each. As I stated before, about 1.5 congressional districts is the area that we represent. In a recent vote, I should say in July, and in one of the worst votes I've seen for the Board of Education, it was voted on to promote anti-racism. My interpretation of that is promoting critical race theory. 7 appointed board members voted for that, with 5 elected board members. One of the appointed board members was not present. I feel that person would have also voted for it. But if you do the numbers real quick, you'd see that if there were only the 11 elected board members 5 board members voted against it of the electeds. 5 electeds voted for it and 1 abstained. That would not be a resolution that passed, and it would be something that wouldn't be having all this action taken. Literally every board meeting, they're bringing in people to promote this and talk about all the wonderful things they're doing in school. And you talked about the white shaming, et cetera. That is happening in Ohio. People need to see this and need to be aware, and they need to make their voice heard if they don't believe that's the right way to go.
Before I turn it over to Kelly for her thoughts, for those that are listening, remember 7 out of 8 appointed board members that were appointed by Governor DeWine voted for critical race theory. And I think that is something I know I hear all the time that we should not be promoting. So it just shows you that the power of those appointments. Kelly, you want to add anything?
I just want to add that this whole critical race theory, the 1619 Project, all of this is a part of the curriculum that abuses children. It bullies children. So in the classroom, every child feels that they're either oppressed or the oppressor. And they're not appropriate. They feel bad about themselves. Either way, they're oppressed or they're the oppressor. But let me talk about the economically disadvantaged. What I wanted to say there is that when I looked back at our property taxes in the last, let's say 30 years, so since 1990, I saw that our property taxes have gone up 358% in this county alone. I don't think that's unique. I think that's true everywhere. And that has doubled the rate of inflation. But yet our incomes don't even reach inflation rate every year. So the families are getting poorer and poorer and poorer as government gets larger and larger and larger. I sent you some slides. Tomorrow night, I'll be presenting in Bell Fountain to a large group about education failures. But what I want to point out is that there's no way any of us financially can keep up, and especially those who are working every day, trying to put food on their table, pay their rent, and heat and clothing for their children. Guys, they can't keep up with this growth in government and needless growth in government. They can't keep up with their taxes that is taking more and more and more of their income. So of course we have economically disadvantaged. These aren't people who aren't working. These are people who are working, trying to make ends meet. When we talk about 612 school districts, there's actually far, far more than that. And Jim, I think you had alluded to before, maybe consolidating, states like Tennessee, they do county school districts, and that made sense. In Springboro, we actually shared our treasurer. We had a fairly large district of 5,500 students. We shared our treasurer. She worked for us 2.5 days a week, and she worked 2.5 days with another district. So we don't need these administrative staffs that we have. We're way into administrative bloat. It's part of the money funnel that has gone to the adults. We talk about the graduation rate on here, and I see that, but that's a false narrative, guys, because it doesn't matter. If you graduate people and you give them a diploma and that diploma means absolutely nothing, then we're perpetrating a fraud on our employers in Ohio. And I think that's the shame, is that these students can fail every single class in high school and get a diploma. So let's just talk about, rather than the rate being 89% and it should be 100%, let's just say, why shouldn't we have some minimum standards? Minimum competencies. That'd be the only test that these kids have to ever take, is minimum competencies to go on to the next grade level. You're right, Jim. They just flip them on to the next grade. They don't care. My conclusion after 4 years on those 2 school boards was they don't care. They fence off 90% of the budget for the adults. The children are a minor inconvenience, but the money is why almost everybody is there. Now, there may not be a few people in the district that are there to really see children learn and see that light bulb go on. But when you graduate students who have failed all their courses and you give them a diploma, that's a fraud to them. It's a fraud to their parents, and it's a fraud to the employers in the state of Ohio. So we need to talk about that. There was one other thing. Oh, yeah. I'm more concerned about the 40% of our students that get a diploma that don't meet the minimum competencies to get into college. And that number may be higher now. ODE hides much of the information they used to publish. none of the stuff that I used to get to be able to make decisions as a board member is available on ODE anymore. It's become the least transparent under Republican governors. Strickland had a very transparent Ohio Department of Education website. Under Kasich and DeWine, things just keep getting chipped away, and now there's hardly anything usable on that website at all. So we got to talk about transparency at some point. But 40% of our graduates don't meet minimum competencies to reach college, to go into college without taking remedial courses. I think we have a problem, Houston. Even if a couple students who think they should go to college can't meet the minimum competencies to get in, I think we have to worry about that.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. And Kelly, you hit on one thing that we talked about a couple sessions back, and that is that even though Ohio has reduced its taxes for companies and even its individual taxes, our spending still went up. So where the taxes went up was real estate taxes. I'm glad you brought that up. I've told people as I travel the state, we may have reduced taxes, but real estate taxes have gone up 400%. And there are a lot of people on fixed income that just can't afford to stay in their home anymore because of these high real estate taxes. So we have to rebalance again. We can't put it all on the real estate burden and say, but we're a state with less taxes. No, we're a state that's still spending the exact same amount we've spent, plus more money every year in spending, yet we've cut taxes and just pushed everything into real estate. It's made it tough for many homeowners. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Let's talk about problems facing Ohio schools from the federal government. We already touched on one of them: critical race theory, Common Core standards, social emotional learning, and federal standards required by accepting federal funding. This is one that just drives me nuts. I mean, people say, why do we do this and why do we do that? A lot of times, the reason we are doing some of these things, whether it's critical race theory, Common Core, is because we're taking federal money. I've talked about this in one of our town halls in the past. We take one out of every $4 comes from the federal government to fund the state treasury. One out of every $4. As long as we're taking their money, we're going to have to listen to them. Kelly, you want to talk first on some of these issues facing the schools?
Sure. I wanted to say that, guys, parents, citizens, none of this is new. This curriculum has been embedded throughout education for a long time. Socio-emotional learning, for example, newly sworn in on the school board, I watched a video of a teacher going around a table with fourth grade readers saying, why do you think, or how do you think the teacher felt to have to give away her pet for the summer? And I thought, that's a really odd way to get at comprehension. When we were growing up, comprehension was assessed by what, where, when, how, why. Did you get the details to what you just read? Instead, in 2010, they were teaching children to think emotionally. Why would that be important? Because you can manipulate people if they think emotionally. It's really sad that the polar bears might have less ice, but it's okay to murder an unborn baby. Do you see what I mean? It's easy to manipulate a crowd if they think emotionally and not intellectually. This has been going on for a long time, making people feel bad about their heritage. My daughter brought me a book, Howard Zinn, not even a historian. He hates America and always has. That way they were forced to read that book, Howard Zinn's The People's History, which is not actual history. He's fabricated a bunch of stuff and put it in a book to convince these young people that their heritage is awful. So I'm just saying, this is not new. We've just put a title to it and passed it. But guys, the best thing you can do is pull your kids out because it's embedded in everything they do.
Thank you, Kelly. John, you have any comments?
Well, we talked a little bit about critical race theory, and I hope that everyone listening and everyone that we run into studies this so they know what it is. We heard a little bit tonight about the shaming and two options. You're either an oppressor or you're oppressed. Which one of those would make you feel good about yourself? This is such a sick approach to children. I hate it, and we're doing everything we can to try to get it stopped at the state level, but it's a runaway train. The Common Core standards, I would just simply say this: just the name by itself. Who wants to be common? Is that what we want for our children to be common? And so have this bare minimum standards, this really low expectations. not a very good plan. Social emotional sounds good on paper, but in reality, it has been taken over by the critical race pushers. That is just another tool to make kids feel bad about themselves or make them feel that someone else is eating their pie. The whole thing with social emotional is, and I pointed this out as there's been discussion in Columbus, the children are not being helped as far as their emotions, etc. They're being taught what to think as opposed to how to think and how to analyze. And that is not what we need. This is literally, in my opinion, a way to brainwash children to thinking crazy liberal thoughts. And it's a bad, bad deal. Federal standards, I would go just a step back from that and say, look, if you go to the ODE website and you look at everything that you see on there that you find repulsive, you'll find there are dollar strings attached to it from the federal government. The Department of Education can't resist so-called free money. And Jim, you talked about that, free money out of our pockets, right?
Well, thank you. And I know we've already run past our 30 minutes. Let's take the slide on some solutions. I'm going to run through those quickly, but I really want us to get into the questions. There's a lot of people already backing up on the questions, but some of the solutions, we direct current funding in early childhood education. We could probably talk all night on that. That's probably something we don't want to talk too much about. Expand VOTEC training, eliminate all federal dollars tied to bad federal programs. Again, I think that should really say eliminate the federal requirements by eliminating the federal dollars we take. Return control to local school districts, expand school choice, dollars should follow the student, encourage people to get involved in their local school boards. Just very quickly, John, do you want to touch on these, and then Kelly, and then we're going to go to questions.
Certainly. The thing I would say about early childhood education is that is best done in a variety of venues that aren't necessarily tied to the government. I say go a step farther and put the funding that we're spending on some of these education programs back in people's pockets and let them make decisions with where they want to go with that funding. As far as the VOTEC, we are making some strides on vocational and technology in schools. There's some new ways to graduate that are tied to that, which I agree with. One of the things that I've pointed out is you don't need to be a rocket scientist to come out and get a job and provide for your family. So let's give that opportunity for kids that might be just totally bored with conventional school programs. Let them get hands-on and go. I talked to a dropout prevention recovery operator yesterday. He said that the dealership, Jim, you can relate to this, the dealership is hiring their first graduate from their, they put a test program in place for auto mechanics. Their first graduate got hired by a dealership right out of the program. The dealership went then and talked to their insurance agent and said, what can we do to make it so that we can hire these kids while they're training? And they got their adjustment on their insurance where they can bring 16-year-olds into work now and let them hands-on learn at the dealership along with their education. This is the right way to do it. Return control to local districts. Although this is a local control state, and you'll hear that repeatedly, that everything's at the local district. If somebody else holds on to the purse strings, they control the district, whether or not you have people voted in at your local level to do the job. School choice, absolutely. Let parents and students decide how they want to be educated. Let that money flow to the best use. And yes, I absolutely encourage people to get involved in local school boards. My youngest son, Josh, was recently elected to the Marlington School Board, and they are doing great things. So yes, do it.
Very good. Kelly, quickly.
Well, return to control to local districts. There's no such thing, guys. As long as the state has 100 mandates that you have to tend to, and they control the tests, and the federal government controls the test, whoever controls the test controls education. So there's no such thing as local control in Ohio. I refuse to believe that makes any sense at all. Expand school choice is the only solution on this page that makes any sense to me. Florida has done it, and they absolutely score better than any other state in the nation, because they have expanded school choice since 2003. And today, their academics are soaring for all students, the economically disadvantaged and those that are not, those that are gifted. They all do extremely well on a school choice or school voucher where they get to compete for that student. That makes sense.
Thank you, Kelly. It's kind of interesting. One of the comments you made, it's really follow the money. I'm hoping our listeners and people watching tonight realize that money from federal government dictates so much. So Tom, let's go to our first question. I guess it's Stephanie.
Yep, we're going to Stephanie first.
Go ahead, Stephanie. You have to unmute. Stephanie, you have to unmute.
All right, we're going to move on to the next one. That will be Linda Burden will be up next.
Linda, you're up. You have a question. You're unmuted.
Yeah. Was it better when Trump was in with the education, and how do we get rid of this critical race theory? It takes the mind of children all ages. So,
well, Linda, I would tell you only from serving in Congress that these standards were put in place a long time ago. They were passed back in the Bush era. They were, even when I was in Congress, we tried to push as much back to the states as we could. But even that's difficult when you got 435 or 535 members when you think of the Senate too. So all you can do is move the ball a little bit closer, which is always the goal. But the best way is for the state to say no more. Kelly, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, in 1980, the unions really became, teachers' unions became prevalent. 1980s, the federal government interfered in education by putting forward outcomes-based education, which gave standards. In 1990s, there was evidence-based education, again, changing the standards. In 2000, it was No Child Left Behind. In 2001, it was Obama's Goals 200 or 2000. 2007, No Child Left Behind was set to expire, and it was put back in place in 2016. So the problem is the federal government has no constitutional rights or authority to be involved in education whatsoever. So of course the state can say, we're a sovereign state, we have no need for the government intrusion, because honestly, whoever controls the test controls education, bottom line. And the union is in full control of education. The union is liberal-minded, we'll just call it what it is, socialist, communist, whatever they're going for. I saw it, I witnessed it, and they're in control. They're in control of what's happening at the federal level. They're in control of what's happening at the state level. So until we get the unions out, we will have no good education for students.
Kelly, just to add for the people that are listening, remember, we're taking the federal money. We have to listen to the federal government. The minute we can say no more to the federal money is the minute we can say we don't have to listen to you anymore. John?
Well, and I think that, one of the things that we always need to look at is, aside from the fact that the money messes with education in Ohio, we also have a bigger operation in Columbus because of that. For all of these monies that have come in, even with the COVID money, 10% of that money stays at ODE. Can you imagine what 10% of all those funds add up to? And how many new employees can happen and new programs that are created, et cetera, with that? None, from my perspective, benefit children and parents. The question was, how do we get rid of critical race theory? This is one where people really have to be active at the local level. You've got to go to those school board meetings. You got to make sure that those school boards know, they need to know what's happening in their schools. The Ohio School Board Association tells members of school boards, hire a superintendent and let him run the school. And what I find is way too often school board members don't even know what's going on in the school. You need people on those boards that know what's going on, that care, and will do something about it. So be at the meetings, be right in their face about this stuff, but more so, be at the ballot box. Make sure you've got good candidates that have the right values running to do these jobs, and we can turn it around. It's a project, but it can be turned around if people engage.
Before we go on to the next question, we're going to have Aaron on, but we did have a question mailed in. The guy is having problems with his microphone. A two-part question to the panelists. What type of alternative education do you favor? Is it private schools, charter schools? And why is the equal amount of tax dollars going to failing public schools across the state?
Before we move on to that one, Tom, and I'm going to let Kelly and John answer that, I do want to make sure that I reemphasize what John said. You know, we have school board opportunities all across the state this year. People need to step up. You need to be able to register, get involved. In many cases, you have until August to get on to run for school board. Make sure you're looking into that, especially after tonight and after what you're hearing. I'll start with John on this question. Do you want to go ahead and answer? I guess.
Yeah. Could you repeat the second part of that question?
Yeah. Why are we sending equal tax dollars to public school districts that are failing?
Okay, I'll hit that first. We're not spending equal tax dollars to public schools that are failing. We're sending a lot more to the schools that are failing. And if you look at those numbers, you'd be amazed and depressed, I guess would be the right word. There's schools that are doing a great job for a third of what some of the inner city schools are getting in tax dollars. What do I prefer for education? And I'll stick to this throughout my life. What I've said about education from my first involvement in a position where I had to deal with it is there's all kinds of options needed. You know, we have all kinds of different people, all kinds of different children. I like all of it. I'd like to see people be able to choose where they want to go, where their kids want to go. And that's the way it's going to work the best. And if we can have a system that dollars flow to the demand, that's where we're going to succeed. And, you know, when you talk about equal, when we look at what charters get and what like the dropout prevention and recovery schools get from the state, it's peanuts compared to the conventional schools.
Right.
And they do the job and they're successful in educating kids that aren't getting it in the regular schools.
Thank you, John. Kelly?
That's education alternatives, and that has to be what we do. I would love it if every church had a school. I would love it if homeschoolers formed more co-ops, because nobody teaches your children as well as you can, guys. I don't care how inept you think you are, the curriculum covers it. And there's classical conversations curriculum, there's Hillsdale's curriculum. You don't have to be the teacher of every subject. Those subjects are already written out. But to teach the children the way they used to, that they have these solid foundations, and not to question their foundations because they're solid. Their heritage is great, is fabulous. Their country is wonderful. Teach them to be a patriot first, a family member second, and I can keep going, a faithful person third. That's what parents need to invest in. I don't believe going to the school board meetings is going to be helpful. Sorry, I've already departed from that mentality. The teachers union is in full control, and the school board members can do virtually nothing to change that. OSBA, Ohio School Board Association, teaches school board members to do what they're told, teaches them not to walk through the building, that their job is to be a cheerleader for their district. None of that is effectively leading a district. So we elect these people and they're just a bunch of bobbleheads. If you want me to speak to your group, guys, it's kellyshepardcohls@gmail.com. I'll speak wherever 3 people gather, and I'll tell you what I saw. And the reason that I say public education is failing our students and our society. So lots of options for school choice. Expand school choice and vouchers or tax incentives for parents to pull their kids out and do something better with them.
I have one piece here, Kelly, and that is faith first, family second,
True.
and country. Okay, that's where we need to be. And
that is what I agree.
I have to accentuate when you talked about homeschooling, et cetera. Sarah Fowler, who now serves in the Ohio legislature, served with me in Columbus. She was the first member of the State Board of Education who was homeschooled. And she is one of the most brilliant people that I've met. Her attention to detail and her ability to pay attention are awesome. So that's one of the things that I would point out, and it was brought to my attention also, and this is something new to me. There's a thing called unschool, where children are allowed to go and study what they want to study. And I thought, wow, that is terrific. So there's so many options for parents that are very, very excellent for kids. Let's make sure their eyes are open.
Yep.
Thank you both. Good answers. I guess we're up. Aaron's up.
Indeed.
Are you guys able to hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, well, as I know Tom knows and Jimmy may know, I told you the other day, I'm actually running for Board of Education in the city of Brooklyn. And I'm wanting to get, involved with my community and so forth. So my question tonight is, how do we hold the teachers, the administrators, and the unions at the state level accountable for dropping grades, dropping test standards, and so forth, when they get so much money and power and backing from the federal government?
Kelly, you want to start?
Yeah, I'd love to start. So what you have to do is, if you open this up and cause competition, then those people are competing for the student, not for the dollar. They're competing for that student. So that school district has to provide evidence that they're better than their competition, right? That's how it works in business. And that's how it works well. We have a business. Education is a business. You have a product, you have a contract, you have people involved in negotiating these contracts. And I'd say that the teachers union is the biggest reason for the failures of education. And I don't think it's an accident that academically the United States has fallen so low globally. I think that's quite on purpose, because then they can make the case that we need more people or we need more money. We'll fix this if you give us one or the other or both. And honestly, we have given them both. But year after year after year, they get more money, they get more people, and the system is still failing our students. Their academics are still low. So I'd say that just giving them the idea that competition will come take their job.
John, do you have any thoughts for a potential new school board member?
I would agree that competition is an answer, but a person who's going to be on a local school board needs to know that they need to be very engaged with the superintendent. They need to make sure that the superintendent is doing what the community wants. And that's going to be more important than anything. And yes, you're going to have fights and have to deal with union issues. You've got to deal with contracts. You've got to look at what those contracts are and try to get them changed on the next round. Because when you see some of the things that they've agreed to, you will cringe.
Can I add that I advocate for putting the negotiated agreement on the ballot, not a levy. You put the negotiated agreement on the ballot and just insist that that's the way this goes down. The community needs to see that the negotiated agreement allows for raises 5 times higher than they're seeing in their own incomes. I don't think they'll agree to that, but whatever. Put it on the ballot and say, look, union, I will give you anything you ask for once the community approves it.
Very good. Great answers, great responses. And Aaron, thank you for running for school board. We need people to get involved in all offices. So school board's just as important. Sometimes people say, well, I don't want to run for school board. Well, I hate to tell you, school board's an important position, just like you're hearing from John and Kelly tonight.
Call me.
Yeah, it looks like we got another Kelly asking a question. Kelly, go ahead. Kelly, you have to unmute.
Give her a second here. If not, we'll go to John Stafford. So John, be ready.
Kelly,
click the unmute.
Okay, we should move.
Yep, let's go to John Stafford. We'll move to him for the next question.
We'll come back to Kelly. John, go ahead. You have a question? There you go. You're unmuted.
Well, I think that on a local level, I've been involved in the Bellbrook Sugar Creek district school levy fight for the last 2 years, and it was eye-opening. The amount of effort that the union puts forth to push through these every 4 to 5 year property tax levies is just unbelievable. What we've had for the last 2 decades, and I think Kelly's hit on this a little bit, is that we have what I call strong arm superintendents that get in control of the school board. Then they push their candidates onto the school board so that basically they rubber stamp everything that the superintendent wants done. Rather than the school board setting policies and procedures, we have superintendents doing that. Now, part of the problem that we ran into in Bellbrook Sugar Creek is that there's really no teeth in the law, meaning people that have no fear of punishment will break the law. We've had our local school board, Bellbrook Sugar Creek, violate the sunshine rules, fine in violation at least 10 times, but the fine's only $500 a piece. Currently, we're also involved with the Ohio Election Commission, and they really have no teeth. What we have is we have a school superintendent that is running the PACs and have set up groups within the PACs to actively attack through the politics of personal destruction anyone who goes against the school board or the union. I've experienced this personally. I think that anyone who thinks that they're going to get onto a school board and enact drastic changes, you had better be able to bring a group of you to control the majority. Otherwise, they are going to come after you, which is what they've done to me personally. It's the politics of personal destruction. Across Ohio, parents need to get involved again. They need to make these school board members realize that they do not work for the teachers union. They work for the taxpayers. If each person in their school district would look at the contracts that the teachers have, like in Bellbrook Sugar Creek, we've got teachers with a base salary of almost $100,000 a year. And then you have all their pickups and their bonuses. So they're averaging maybe $135,000 a year with everything, but they're working 183 days a year, 5 days a week, 7.5 hours a day, 8 months out of the year. And yet they feel that they're underpaid. And if anyone wants to see what's really going on, take a look at Bellbrook Sugar Creek. And what you will see is that Bellbrook Sugar Creek, along with every other district in Ohio, they really don't have a funding problem. What they have is a spending problem related to wages, benefits, pickups, and bonuses that these teachers are demanding. And we are forcing our senior citizens, and I'm glad that Jim has put this as a platform issue. There is a gentrification that's going on in every community across Ohio where we are forcing our senior citizens out of their homes along with our disabled vets because they can't pay the property taxes. And this has got to end. And I think Jim is going to do that. He has my full support. And I think, Kelly, you're well aware of everything that I'm talking about. This is a fight. And across Ohio, it's the same thing. It may be a different district, but it's the same problem. We just recently filed criminal complaints against the Bellbrook Sugar Creek School Board for the emergency levy that they did. They falsified a public document, in our opinion, to try to push this levy through. Oh,
looks like we lost him. I don't know what happened there, Tom, but anyway.
John, you still there? We're going to move to Dennis Crouch. Dennis, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Dennis, you have to unmute. There we go.
Okay, I'm back. My questions have changed from the time we started this to where we are right now. I want to go back to CRT again, critical race theory. And I want to understand why if we got most of the members of the Ohio School Board vote against it, but we got 7 of 8 of DeWine's puppets I'll call him that for lack of a better term, his puppets are voting for CRT. Does anybody in this state understand DeWine has approved CRT? Does anybody really understand that? How much are we getting this information out? I'm learning a lot by being here tonight, and I'm just getting torqued off. That's all I am. I'm just, I'm mad, and I'm disgusted, and I want DeWine out of there. I want people to know that he is approved, he personally is approved, the CRT program that Ohio is going to implement if we don't change it around.
I just refer to it as child abuse. And we're sending these children to child abuse centers. So teaching these children that you're either a victim or a villain. You're either oppressed or the oppressor. And it all has to do with the color of your skin. If that isn't racist, the definition of racist, there is no such thing. DeWine advocates for racism in our schools. DeWine advocates for abuse of our children in our schools. He's along with the union, he's an arm of the union, and they're getting exactly what they want.
Dennis, if there's one thing good about these town halls that we have, we do try and make sure information gets out. I'm glad you pointed that out. I actually asked John to make sure he pointed that out. You do have 8 appointed members of the school board by the governor. 7 of them have approved this, which means the governor's appointees have approved this. People should be aware of that. But I also want you to know there is a bill in the House, I think, and maybe John, you know better, that to take all those away from the governor and allow them to be elected, appointed or elected. John, is that the case?
Yeah, the bill that was just introduced, I believe yesterday, calls for the board to be fully elected and no appointees from the governor. And Dennis, I want to add some more to what you're talking about our governor. In the last budget round, he added $1.6 billion specifically for social emotional learning and mental health. Fortunately, the current legislature, the House, has taken his request for something similar in the current budget out of the budget. But he has no limit to the amount of money that he wants to spend putting psychologists and all these people in the schools that will interfere with the kids' thinking. It's incredible to me. I'm not sure, what his basis is for thinking that everyone needs psychological help, but he did state when he came out with this new lottery, people will think I'm crazy, and I think that might be true.
And now, for those that are listening tonight, John's talking about, many of you might have learned last night, I was actually driving to a meeting at 6:30, and I got to the meeting at 5:30. I got to the meeting at 6, and somebody said, did you hear what Governor DeWine did? He's giving away 5 $1 million awards if you took the vaccine. Well, think about it. That $5 million could be used in so many better places. And he also said that it's not taxpayer money, it's federal money, which is taxpayer money. Our next question is from Sue Ellen King. Go ahead, Sue.
Actually, before Sue Ellen goes, I want to get one of these emailed questions in, Jim. This is a really good one. Goes to school funding. Why are homeowners in Ohio responsible for funding the schools? Ohio is one of the few schools that do this. Why is this?
John, why don't we start with you since you were in the legislature? This is a topic that has been brought up to the Ohio legislature multiple times. It's been called unconstitutional, but I will tell you, nothing's unconstitutional unless it's deemed unconstitutional, and that's one of the issues. If we got to this to courts, it may be deemed unconstitutional. But John, you want to go ahead and answer that?
Yeah, I'm glad you hit that, Jim, and that's something I point out in every circumstance when people point to the constitutionality, that there are changes in every budget to how school funding happens. And currently there's a plan that they're working on that may or may not come through. I don't think it's going to survive the Senate. That goes a little bit different on how they're approaching it. They're looking more at, what it takes to do an education and providing the money that is needed for that. And then it'll be up to locals if they want to add more to that. Not a real bad plan, but as with anything, devil's in the details. I will say this, and I served 8 years in the legislature. I'm always a little bit concerned about shifting funding to the higher level. And I know that I pay a ton of real estate taxes. I don't enjoy that necessarily, but I do appreciate that a lot of the money does go to local schools and so on. But the one thing I would tell you is that it is one tool that voters have. And a good example was, I believe it was Rocky River, just had a ballot issue turned down by voters, and it was tied directly to the CRT. In other words, the word had gotten out to the public about what they were doing with critical race theory, and voters showed up at the polls and said, no dice, we're not giving you the money. That is one of the ways that you can have some control at the local level. So I definitely don't believe that we need to get away from real estate tax altogether, because I think that you cede that control to the state. You'll have the same thing that we've talked about with federal money pushing down and interfering with how we do it at the state level. We'll have more of the state telling people exactly how to do it at the local level if the local aren't contributing substantially.
Kelly, any thoughts?
Yeah, my understanding is the Supreme Court has ruled several times that the way that schools are funded is unconstitutional. What that means is that they believe that the Ohio School Board or the Ohio Department of Education should come up with, or the legislature should come up with a formula that gives every child a number on their head, and then work from there. And they've never been brave enough to do that. The legislators have never sat down and said every child that goes to a public education institution is worth $10,000 per pupil. That's what they don't want to do. And I disagree. I think that formula needs to happen, that every child that goes to public schools, we will give you $10,000. Now, if they have special needs, gifted or special ed needs, we're going to have to bump that number up. But in Tennessee, it works rather well. Their funding is not based on these local levies. What these local levies do is they tear apart communities. They absolutely tear apart communities. So while, I don't like them, I think they're awful. I think that individuals then, like me, have to fight the levy that appears every couple years. And it just gets really old and wearing on us, because we're looking at the people around us thinking, how can these people afford this? It's another $500 a year. That's probably another $50 a month. They're already strapped as they are. These are people with small, young children. And nobody seems to care. It's because they want their fenced off 90% of their budget to go to the adults. And, the kids are a second thought. If they really thought about the kids, they would do child first budgeting. They would do zero-based budgeting. There's lots of ways to put the children first, but they're not interested in hearing those.
Thank you, Kelly. Our next question, I guess, is from Sue Ellen King.
I have some information on critical race theory. At our civic group, we just had a speaker from Ashbrook Center, which is in Ashland, Ohio. It's been there a long time. It's conservative. We had the executive director talk. It was pretty much about Thomas Jefferson as it relates to critical race theory and the things that are being said. But he did tell us at that college, teachers come there because they need to have continuing education, and they want to come to a place that has courses that they can use and that's truthful. So they come there for history, and then they take it back to their schools. And then Ashbrook, because of their patrons that they have booklets and DVDs that are based on primary source documents that teachers can actually get and use in their classes, because teachers are allowed to teach supplementally. I guess a lot of teachers think that they don't have as much latitude as they do, but they can actually bring things into the class. And so right now, until we get all this stuff sorted out, teachers could contact Ashbrook Center. And there's a website, tah.org. It's for teachers, and it has all this supplemental material, and it's free. So they are actually a good resource for everything that we're talking about tonight, the Ashbrook Center. I didn't realize, and they've been doing this for a while, I didn't realize how valuable they were in the state of Ohio.
Well, thank you, Sue Ellen, for that information. Look, anytime we can add, one thing I love about these town halls is many cases, and I did town halls when I was in Congress, you know, sometimes it's best to listen than to talk, and sometimes it's good to hear, and your information I know is helpful. And so that's great. That's great that there are resources like that. Next individual in the loop is Michelle. Michelle, do you have a question?
I do. I have a question. This year, I became homeschool teacher to my youngest of 6 children. And believe me, it was quite an eye-opener looking at what they were really studying and everything. And all of our older kids went to Marysville, and that's where our youngest went. But this year, through the pandemic, they brought in the Florida Virtual Academy. And that was probably the worst choice that they never discussed with anyone in the community. And I ended up doing research of my own and finding out a whole lot about the education just in America in general. And I was shocked to find that in 1990, we were number 6 in the world for education as a whole. And now we've fallen to like number 7, number 28 in the world. And so then my next thought was, okay, let me research who has some of the better education. And it turned out to be the UK. So what I did is, along with the Florida Virtual Academy, which was very, very poor in quality, I taught my own son. He was in kindergarten. And at the beginning of kindergarten, he could do the alphabet and do that sort of thing, but he didn't know how to read. But through the Florida Virtual Academy, if I didn't supplement what I was teaching him, he would have never learned how to read. And by using books from the UK that I bought, he started reading like in November, because they do it in such a fashion that they are completely focused on the child learning and understanding things like phonics and grammar and math and handwriting and science. Their education is very focused on that. And through that whole thing, I also found out too that for all their children from their preschool up until 2nd grade, they get free lunches, regardless of income. And so I think that ties in with everything else, that if we focus on getting the children going from a very young age, that they're going to do better. And I think a lot of it comes down to the superintendents and how they're spending it. They're being very reckless, I think, with a lot of the funding that they are getting. And if somehow we could fix that, I think a lot of the problems we could change. And my basic thing is, I think the US as a whole needs to get rid of Common Core. Seeing how, when that came into play, it's like overnight, my older children, all of their education just got so watered down. They were less engaged. They just, you know, they were just kind of going through the motions because it was really rather boring. And, you know, it's a great thing to be part of the school board, but holy cow, how do you do that? How do you go about that, to be part of that, to have a voice when it's so controlled by so many people? And what can I do as a citizen to make it better? Because, you know, I feel like I failed my older children because I wasn't part of it. What can I do besides what can be done? I just really feel we need to do something soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. And I would tell you, a lot of times our political leaders don't want to touch Common Core, because to touch Common Core means you're touching funding. You're cutting back on funding. And when 1 out of every $4 is coming from the federal government, you need every dollar you can get. So it's always become a problem. And some of the people who will tell you, well, I want to get rid of Common Core, are the ones who actually brought Common Core in. So I know while you were talking, Kelly was smiling. So Kelly, do you have any comments? You seemed like you were happy that some of the comments she was making.
Oh, well, there was quite a few. I appreciate that she did homeschool, that she did her own homework, and she's the best educator her child could have. And I appreciate the fact that your children, once this was all put in place, became displacent. And we're talking about, Jim, you put on one of your slides that, disrespect. These children are bored to tears. They're abused in the classroom by being told that they're bad people, and especially dependent upon the color of their skin, that their heritage is bad. So your children experience the emotional turmoil and abuse that is happening, but it's been happening for quite some time. It's not all Common Core. We can't blame it on that. It's in there. And even if we got rid of Common Core, the curriculum is still tainted, just like if it were there. So it's all part of a plan to really dumb down America, make children dislike education. Actually, I think we were 49th out of 72 countries in children that dislike their schooling now. Not a surprise, but they're also taught many things that you don't want your children to learn. I'm so proud of you for homeschooling. And I know that's not for everybody. Trust me, I was totally intimidated by the thought. But then when I found a curriculum that I liked and told my son, you're gonna stay home for 2 years and we're gonna do it from here, and he was okay with that, it turned out great, actually. So it can be the best opportunity for your child.
But by the way, I want to add one thing. There are some really good school teachers too. We can't say this is the fault of the school teachers. Many times school teachers are locked in a box and they've got to teach within this curriculum and this testing and all this. So, my hand's off to many of the school teachers. There are some very good teachers out there. So this is not as much about the individual teachers. There are some good ones there. I want to make sure. John, you have any thoughts?
I just want to go back on that point to Sue's comment about Ashbrook Center and resources. The best teachers do that. They go out and look for those resources. They're not sitting back waiting for someone to hand something to them for curriculum. They're working to find the best thing to put in front of the kids. But for our current person, Michelle, no one will care as much about your child as you do. So, what you're doing, very commendable. I know that homeschooling is a sacrifice, but boy, is it worth it. For the ones that can do it, do it. That's an awesome thing to do for your kids.
Thank you, John. Our next question is from Eileen. Eileen, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a repeat basically on the unconstitutional way that we fund education. Do you have any advice for legislators, and basically what is the best way to support legislators to do the right thing as far as in-school funding, to educate Ohioans as well on that issue, and then not taking federal dollars, because so much of this is following the money. I mean, you have to, go by whatever the federal or state rules are. So I guess probably on school funding from the state and federal level, and then how do we impact legislators and share it with Ohioans?
John, why don't we go to you for this one?
Yeah, let me start with this. I meet very few elected officials that couldn't spend as much money as you could give them. And that applies to school districts, et cetera. There's really no limit to how much people will spend if they can get their hands on it. So I think that sometimes we concentrate on the unconstitutionality, and what we should be concentrating on, let's get the value for the dollar. Let's make sure that we're not wasting money on frivolous programs that don't achieve the results we want. As far as that, trying to have a constitutional funding plan, it's extremely complicated, between the fact that you have to figure out how you're going to have that constant stream of funds to supply it. And that's why, unfortunately, real estate is really a solid, reliable source for funding, where if you go to sales tax, income tax, et cetera, that fluctuates all over the board. So it is complicated, and I certainly don't envy the legislature trying to fix that problem. I encourage them to continue to work on it and try to do better. But I would not condemn them because you're not satisfied that it's done. Just keep working with them. And if you have great ideas, take it to your legislature. the legislators that do the best work rely on constituents to bring them the best ideas.
Can I add, I would disagree that property tax is the best way to fund our schools. I think that sales tax is,
Kelly.
Okay, I'm just saying that I think there's other ways to get the funding for school districts. And I think that when you penalize property owners for improving their property, 60% of the the taxes that will increase when they improve their property will go to the school district. I think you've made people then disinvest in their own property and afraid to improve their own property or afraid to upgrade their property. But people who have the money, and I'm talking about elderly, I'm talking about people who can't afford much, but they might want to add on a room, a bedroom or a bathroom, but they say, you know, I can't afford the taxes that'll go up. But if people have a solid income, a constant income, and they want to spend more money, sales tax makes sense. But our school districts are not underfunded by any means. No. They're currently well funded. We don't need more taxes for school districts. We need more accountability. It's not missing the cash, people. It's not missing the money at all. We are well-funded school districts in this country, and especially in Ohio. We are missing the accountability piece. That's what school boards have to do. Stop listening to OSBA and do your job, school boards.
One good thing about our panel tonight is you can see that sometimes we have differences of opinion, but that is great. That's how we all learn together. Tom, do we have another question?
Yep, our last question tonight was sent in through the question panel here. And speaking of accountability, it goes towards accountability. When does it become the state's responsibility to step in when local school districts consistently fail their students?
Boy, that is a great question. That happens. I'm not too sure in many cases. I believe the rankings are as proper as they should be, because it shouldn't be about rankings. It should be about the quality of the education that the child has when they leave the school and how prepared they are to get into the real world. But so failing is always an issue. But Kelly, we'll start with you.
I don't know if you're talking about academic failures or financial failures, because when the state comes in with the financial failures, that's all a contrived situation. The treasurers make all the difference on that. And the state comes in and does nothing different, doesn't tell them to spend differently whatsoever.
This pertains to the Academic Distress Commission. So he's speaking academically. And
I think that those are the schools that you just say every child gets a voucher. You've got to do something.
John?
Yeah, you know, the Academic Distress Commission has not solved any problems. They've spent a ton of money. They bring in a CEO and he hires a lot of people and the results are no better. Competition is the answer. If we had money to flow to the people to make the decision to go to alternate schools, either these schools would get better or they'd be out of business. And, you know, if you're doing a terrible job, you know, if Jim and your dealership had terrible relations with your customers, you would not have been successful. And that's the way it should be in the schools. If you're not doing a good job, you shouldn't be there.
That's the competition side, and I agree, and results-oriented, results-based. So, look, thank you. I think tonight was a great discussion. This is what I love, a lot of information, a lot of questions, and a lot of ideas, and hopefully a lot of learning. So again, I want to thank the panel. I want to thank Kelly and John for being on tonight. I want to thank everybody that tuned in. This is, as I said, our 9th town hall. This was a great discussion about education. If you want to learn more and become part of the team and keep these things going, please become a Renacci, potentially a Renacci County captain by emailing team@jimrenacci.com. Also follow us on facebook.com/Jim Renacci, twitter.com/Jim Renacci. And as always, if you want to see a replay of this, go to jimrenacci.com because we will put this up among the other 8. And again, I've had many people say those were great sessions. I've had people take a look at that weren't on tonight had a chance to look at these after the fact. So again, thank you all for being on tonight. Thank you again, Kelly and John. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, Kelly, I think there is one person who is actually going to be contacting you about speaking. So you got a speaking engagement out of tonight. And again, thank you. Good night, and appreciate your attendance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.